Have you ever felt that someone is draining your energy? Malicious people have specific behaviors that, if you don't recognize them in time, can cause a lot of damage in your life. In this video, we will show you the 12 typical behaviors of malicious people. Knowing these signs is crucial to protect yourself and maintain healthy relationships. Before we dive into these behaviors, if you find value in these videos, please subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. Let's get started. Have you ever felt that someone is leading you where they want to go without you realizing it? Welcome to the fascinating and dangerous world of manipulation, the first red flag in our bad person detector. Imagine you're playing chess, but your opponent changes the rules on a whim without you noticing. That's how subtle manipulation can be. According to Dr. Harriet Breaker, author of Who's Pulling Your Strings, manipulation is the exercise of hidden or indirect influence over another person to behave in a way that favors the manipulator's interests. But how do you recognize a manipulator in action? Pay attention to these common tactics. 1. Emotional guilt. If you really loved me, you would do this for me. 2. Gaslighting, making you doubt your own perception of reality. 3. Victimhood. They are always the victim in every situation. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them." Manipulators are adept at distorting our opinions to their advantage. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology revealed that people with manipulative tendencies tend to score high on the traits of narcissism and Machiavellianism. What a combo! But all is not lost. Here are some strategies for coping with manipulation. 1. Set clear boundaries. A simple no can be your best shield. 2. Trust your intuition. If something doesn't add up, it's probably for a good reason. 3. Seek support. Talk to trusted friends for perspective. Psychologist George Simon suggests that the best defense against manipulation is knowledge. So congratulations, you're already taking the first step. Remember, not all people who manipulate occasionally are bad. Sometimes we can all fall for these tactics without realizing it. The key is to recognize them and work on ourselves to improve. As Marcus Aurelius would say, very soon you will have forgotten everything. Very soon everything will have forgotten you. So don't obsess over manipulators, but keep your eyes peeled. And speaking of wide eyes, get ready for the second warning sign. The art of never apologizing. Do you know someone who is always right, even when they're wrong? This fascinating phenomenon is more common than you think, and, according to experts, may be an indicator of deeper problems. Imagine for a moment that life is one big game of Monopoly. We all make mistakes, we all pass through the go-to-jail box from time to time, but there are players who seem to think they have a permanent get-out-of-jail-free. These are the masters of the art of never apologizing. Psychologist Robert Enright, a pioneer in the study of forgiveness, points out that the inability to apologize is often related to a fragile ego and a deep-seated fear of vulnerability. It is as if these people wear an emotional armor that prevents them from acknowledging their mistakes. But what does Stoic philosophy have to say about this? Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations reminds us, the best way to take revenge is not to resemble the one who has offended us. In other words, if someone does not apologize to you, the best response is not to fall into the same pattern. Now, how do you identify these apology allergy sufferers? Here are a few clues. 1. They always have an excuse ready. 2. They deflect blame onto others or circumstances. 3. They minimize the impact of their actions. A study published in the Journal of Personality revealed that people with narcissistic traits are significantly less likely to offer sincere apologies. Surprise. But all is not lost. If you find yourself dealing with someone like this, or worse, if you recognize yourself in this description, here are a few tips. 1. Practice empathy. Try to understand why they have such a hard time apologizing. 2. Set clear boundaries. Don't allow a lack of apology to become the norm. Remember, acknowledging our mistakes doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. So the next time you feel the words, "I'm sorry," getting stuck in your throat, think about this. Would you rather be right or happy. Sometimes a simple apology can be the bridge to healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Now let's move on to the next sign. Have you ever come across someone who seems to have a heart of stone? Well, this is the third sign of our bad person detector, lack of empathy. This characteristic is like an invisible wall that separates some individuals from the rest of humanity. Imagine for a moment that you are in a world where no one can feel what you feel. Scary, isn't it? Well, that's how people who lack empathy live. Psychologist Daniel Goleman describes empathy as the ability to tune in emotionally to others. Without it, human relationships become cold and superficial. But how do you identify someone who lacks empathy? Here are some clues. 1. They react with indifference to the suffering of others. 2. They have difficulty understanding others' perspectives. 3. They often make insensitive comments without realizing it. 4. They have difficulty maintaining deep and meaningful relationships. A study conducted by the University of Michigan revealed that empathy levels among college students have declined by 40% over the past 30 years. Wow, it seems we are facing an epidemic of stony hearts. But be warned, all is not lost. The good news is that empathy can be cultivated. According to several studies, practicing active listening and putting ourselves in others' shoes can significantly increase our empathic capacity. Now, what to do if you encounter someone who seems to have the heart of an iceberg? Here are some tips. 1. Don't take it personally. Remember that this person's lack of empathy reflects more about them than it does about you. Avoid internalizing their behavior and keep your self-esteem intact. 2. Don't expect them to change overnight. Empathy is like a muscle. It takes time and practice to develop. 3. Lead by example. Sometimes showing empathy can inspire others to do the same. Remember, we all have days when we struggle to put ourselves in others' shoes. The key is to recognize this and work on it. As the Dalai Lama said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And speaking of practicing, how about a little exercise? The next time you meet someone who gets on your nerves, try to imagine what might be going on in their life to make them act that way. You may be surprised by what you discover. Let's go now to the fourth warning sign in our bad people detector, the constant creation of conflict. Do you ever feel like you're in the middle of a constant storm where conflicts arise out of nowhere? These mean-spirited people are like drama conductors, setting off disagreements like fireworks on a quiet night. Their motivation is sometimes pure amusement. Other times it's a tactic to divert attention from their own shortcomings. It's as if they have radar to detect peace and feel a compelling need to destroy it. Psychologist John Gottman, known for his research on relationships, identified this behavior as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in interpersonal relationships. He calls it contempt, and it's a form of conflict that goes beyond simple arguing. But how does this affect those around them? Imagine living in a house where the walls are constantly shaking. Such is the toxic environment created by these individuals. Peace and harmony become distant concepts, replaced by an atmosphere charged with tension. Writer Ryan Holiday, in his book, The Obstacle is the Way, reminds us, calm is contagious. Unfortunately, so is chaos. And these people are like a virus of conflict, infecting every interaction and relationship around them. So how do we cope with people like this? Here are some strategies. 1. Don't feed the drama. Remember, it takes 2 to tango the tango of conflict. 2. Practice stoic indifference. Marcus Aurelius would say, choose not to be harmed, and you will not be harmed. 3. Seek allies. Surround yourself with people who value peace as much as you do. Recognizing these conflict artists is the first step in protecting yourself. As Carl Jung said, what you deny subdues you, what you accept transforms you. Accept that these people exist, but don't let their internal chaos become your external reality. Before we move on to the 5th telling sign, if you are liking the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel with the bell so you don't miss future videos. And if you enjoy this type of content as much as I do, comment, I love learning. Let's keep learning together and improving our lives. Signal number 5. Constant lies. Imagine for a moment that you are building a house. Each brick represents a truth, a shared experience, a moment of trust. Now, what would happen if someone started replacing those bricks with balloons painted to look like bricks? Exactly, sooner or later it would all come crashing down. Lies are like those balloons disguised as bricks. They may seem harmless at first, even useful at times, but eventually they undermine the foundation of any relationship. And this is where our friend Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who didn't mince words, comes in. He said that honesty is an essential virtue that underpins the foundations of solid, healthy relationships. Can you imagine Seneca at a family gathering where everyone is lying about who ate the last piece of cake? He would probably leave the room in philosophical protest. But let's get serious. Constant lying isn't just a bad habit, it's a red flag. They can take many forms, from little white lies to elaborate stories worthy of a spy movie. The problem is that, over time, they become a kind of language of their own to the person telling them, and you're left there trying to decipher a code that's constantly changing. Now, why would anyone choose to live in this maze of lies? Sometimes it's to manipulate, sometimes it's to hide damaging behavior, and sometimes it's simply because they've forgotten how to be honest. It's as if they've lost the instruction manual for the truth and are improvising as they go along. But how can you spot a compulsive liar? Here are some clues to help you. 1. Inconsistencies in their stories. If you notice that the details of their stories change frequently, you may be dealing with a liar. 2. They avoid eye contact. Although it is not an absolute rule, many people tend to avoid looking directly into your eyes when they are lying. 3. Changes in body language. Watch for gestures such as touching their nose, rubbing their neck, or crossing their arms. These can be signs of discomfort when lying. 4. Evasive answers. If someone consistently avoids answering your questions directly, they could be hiding something. 5. Difficulty telling the story backwards. An interesting trick is to ask the person to tell their story in reverse order. Liars often have difficulty doing this because they are making it up as they go along. So what can we do about this? First, recognize the signs. If someone constantly changes their version of events, if their stories don't add up, or if you get that constant feeling that something doesn't add up, it's time to pay attention. It's not about becoming a private detective, but it is about trusting your intuition. Third, and perhaps most importantly, cultivate your own honesty. Be that solid brick in the wall of truth. Not only will you feel better about yourself, but you will also inspire others to be more honest. Remember, identifying someone who is constantly lying is not about judging. It's about protecting yourself. It's like having an umbrella on a rainy day. You don't avoid the rain, but at least you don't get soaked. Let's go now to the 6th sign. Imagine being with someone who explodes in overreactions whenever he or she is criticized or upset. This behavior is like turning on a red warning light. The 6th sign that cannot be underestimated when identifying a problematic person in your life. Imagine a pressure cooker about to explode. These are the people who explode at the slightest criticism. This overreaction is like an emotional earthquake that shakes everything around them. Sound familiar? But why do some people react so disproportionately? The answer lies within themselves. These emotional outbursts are often a reflection of deep insecurities and fragile self-esteem. It is as if any criticism is a direct threat to their identity. The ability to accept criticism in a mature manner is an indication of emotional maturity and self-awareness. When someone cannot handle criticism, it is as if they are trapped in a cycle of constant denial and defensiveness. A study conducted by the University of Michigan found that people who overreact to criticism tend to have lower levels of emotional well-being and more conflicted interpersonal relationships. This underscores the importance of identifying this behavior and addressing it appropriately. Remember, a healthy relationship is built on open communication and the ability to accept criticism constructively. If you encounter someone who overreacts to criticism, it is vital to set clear boundaries and protect your emotional well-being. Signal number 7. Have you ever met someone who seems to think the world revolves around them? Welcome to the fascinating and sometimes frustrating world of Protagonist Syndrome. This phenomenon, closely related to narcissism, is more common than you think. Imagine for a moment that life is one big play. The person with Protagonist Syndrome always sees themselves as the main character, relegating everyone else to mere supporting actors or extras in their big production. Sounds like fun, right? Well, not so much if you're one of those extras. From a psychological perspective, narcissism goes beyond simply loving yourself. Dr. Craig Malkin, a Harvard psychologist, describes it as an addiction to feeling special. It's as if these people have an insatiable hunger for admiration and attention. History is full of figures who could have been diagnosed with this syndrome. Think of Napoleon Bonaparte, for example. The man literally crowned himself emperor. Imagine the level of confidence required to do something like that. Or consider Louis XV of France, who supposedly said, "The state is me." Clearly, these guys did not suffer from low self-esteem. Now, how do you deal with these people in your daily life? Here are a few tricks. 1. Set clear boundaries. People with Protagonist Syndrome will often try to invade your space. Don't be afraid to say no. 2. Don't feed their ego. Avoid excessive flattery. An occasional compliment is fine, but don't make it your full-time job. 3. Look for common ground. Despite their self-centeredness, even narcissists can form meaningful connections if you find shared interests. Remember, it's not about changing these people. Spoiler alert, you probably can't. But learning to navigate their troubled waters without sinking. And here comes the interesting part. We all have a little bit of a protagonist inside of us. Yes, even you. The next time you find yourself thinking you're the center of the universe, give yourself pause and remember, you're a star, yes, but in a galaxy full of them. So the next time you find yourself on the stage of life with someone who seems to want all the spotlight for themselves, take a deep breath, smile, and remember, they may think it's their show, but you decide your role in it. And who knows, you may find that being an extra has its advantages. At least you don't have to memorize as many lines. Let's go now to signal number 8. Have you ever had the feeling that someone only approaches you when they need something? Let's dive into the art of taking advantage of others, but not to practice it, but to detect it and defend ourselves. Imagine that life is a great game of chess. Opportunists are those players who are always looking to sacrifice their pawns, that is you, to advance in their game. But don't worry, today we will turn you into a bishop, or better yet, a queen, able to see through their moves. The Stoic philosopher Seneca said, "He who takes advantage of another's misfortune is not far from desiring it," and boy, was he right. Opportunists usually have a radar to detect vulnerabilities, and they don't hesitate to exploit them. Sound familiar? Someone who only calls you when they need a favor, but not everything is black and white in the world of opportunism. Sometimes we can all fall into opportunistic behavior without realizing it. The key is intent and frequency. It's one thing to ask for help occasionally, and quite another to have a hidden agenda in every interaction. Now, how can we protect ourselves from these emotional vampires without becoming hermits? Here are some tips. 1. Value your time and energy. You don't have to be everyone's lifeline. 2. Practice reciprocity. If someone only takes and never gives, it's time to rethink the relationship. 3. Healthy relationships are based on mutual give and take. The famous psychologist Carl Rogers famously said, "The only way to understand a person is to put yourself in their shoes." Ironically, this is a skill that opportunists rarely practice. So the next time someone tries to use you as a stepping stone, remember that you are more of a stepping stone. You can propel them, yes, but you also have the power to bounce them back up and fall back down. The power is in your hands. That said, we'll reveal the 9th sign. Have you ever felt that your personal boundaries are about as respected as a red light to an impatient driver? Well, friends, welcome to our next sign of our bad person detector, the constant lack of respect for boundaries. Imagine for a moment that your personal space is like your favorite garden. Now, what if someone decided to use it as their personal playground without your permission? Frustrating, isn't it? Well, that's what it feels like when someone constantly ignores your boundaries. The famous psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The only road worth traveling is the one that leads to being yourself." But how can we be ourselves if someone is constantly invading our space? Malicious people often see boundaries as obstacles to overcome, not lines to respect. They may invade your privacy, ignore your requests for space, or persist in behaviors you've made clear are unacceptable. It's as if they have a PhD in ignoring social cues, but all is not lost. Here are some tips for dealing with these boundary invaders. 1. Be clear and direct. Don't leave room for interpretation. 2. Be consistent. If you give in once, it's like inviting a vampire into your home. Once it's in, it will be hard to get it out. 3. Practice self-care. Remember, you can't control their actions, but you can control your responses. Psychologist Henry Cloud points out, boundaries define who we are and who we are not. So the next time someone tries to trample your personal garden, gently remind them that your flowers are not for stepping on. And speaking of stepping on toes, have you noticed how some people seem to have a PhD in criticizing others? Well, hold on, because that's our next warning sign. This toxic habit can be more damaging than you imagine. Imagine for a moment that you're surrounded by people who only see the negative in you. How would you feel? Probably not very well. Psychologist John Gottman found that in healthy relationships, the ratio of positive to negative interactions should be at least 5 to every negative one. When criticism exceeds this threshold, emotional well-being is seriously compromised. Throughout my life, I have had classmates and acquaintances who were real professional critics. I decided to walk away completely, and you know what? It was one of the best decisions I ever made. But beware, let's not confuse constructive criticism with this toxic behavior. The difference lies in intention and frequency. Constructive criticism seeks to help, while constant criticism only seeks to harm or control. The Stoic Seneca reminds us, choose someone whose way of living, as well as his words and even his face, which is the mirror of the soul, please you. In other words, surround yourself with people who make you happy and drive you to grow. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology revealed that being exposed to constant negativity can even affect our physical health. So beware, it's not just your mood that's at stake. So what do we do if we find ourselves caught in this cycle of negativity? So how do we deal with these tireless critics? Here are a few tips. 1. A simple, "I appreciate your opinion, but I didn't ask for it," can work wonders. 2. Practice empathy. Sometimes, the one who criticizes the most is the one who suffers the most inside. 3. Surround yourself with positivity. Seek out people who inspire you and make you feel good. That said, let's move on to sign number 11. Have you ever come across someone who seems to have an excuse for everything? Imagine you're playing the goose game of life, but every time you land on a bad square, instead of backing up, you blame the dice, the board, or even the dog that happened to be walking by. This is how people who avoid responsibility act. Lack of responsibility is like an escape artist. These people are able to slip out of any uncomfortable situation faster than a magician disappearing in a puff of smoke. They always have an excuse ready, as if they have an automatic justification generator in their brain. But why is this attitude so dangerous? Well, imagine you're building a house with someone who never admits to driving a crooked nail. In the end, you'll have a shaky house and probably a good dose of frustration. Lack of accountability affects not only the one who practices it, but everyone around them. It's like a virus that infects relationships, creating an environment of distrust and resentment. Sound familiar? Now, how do you identify someone who goes from responsibility? Here are some clues. 1. They always have an excuse ready. 2. They blame others for their mistakes. 3. They constantly victimize themselves. 4. They change the subject when they are held accountable. If you know someone who does these things frequently, you may be dealing with a professional avoider of responsibility. But all is not lost. If you've noticed that you fall into some of these behaviors yourself, congratulations. Recognizing it is the first step to change. Remember, we all make mistakes. The difference is in how we handle them. Responsibility is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. So the next time you're tempted to blame traffic for being late, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what can I do differently next time? The 12th and final signal, the pursuit of revenge or punishment. Have you ever encountered someone who cannot let go of even the smallest offense? Well, today we delve into the last signal of our detector of bad people, the constant pursuit of revenge or punishment. Imagine a person who holds a grudge as if it were their most prized treasure. These people have a huge difficulty in handling criticism or rejection. Instead of accepting comments or respecting others' decisions, they embark on a mission of retaliation worthy of an action movie. But beware, it's not always as obvious as a Hollywood villain. Sometimes it manifests in more subtle forms: rumors, sabotage of opportunities, or even manipulation of relationships. It's as if they have a radar for detecting offenses and an arsenal of negative responses ready to fire. And you know what's most curious? Several studies have revealed that these vengeful people often experience high levels of stress and a very poor emotional well-being. It's as if they are drinking poison, hoping it will harm someone else. The key is to stay calm and not feed their need for conflict. Remember, their behavior says more about them than about you. Now that you know these signals, it's up to you to use this knowledge to protect yourself and cultivate healthier relationships. If you've made it this far, write emotional well-being in the comments so I'll know who the victorious ones are who made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate notifications for more content like this in the future. Share this video with those who might find it useful, and consider supporting the channel by becoming a member, link in the pinned comment. I have also included the link to my ebook in the comments below. Now I recommend watching one of these two videos to continue learning about Stoicism and human psychology. A big hug and see you next time.